Present. Okay, here we are. We are now actually live. Earlier we weren't live. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us live here on Real Talk with the Cummings. Our guest today is Mr. Rod Fleming, and we had read the actual.
We read the bio, but apparently we weren't
live.
Something happened.
Yeah, because it was.
Rod's a Scottish multimedia artist and writer with a long career as a freelance journalist and photographer. He writes books on a variety of subjects, topics in both fiction and nonfiction. Rob is an active writer, photographer, and publisher, and he's 61 years old. I am divorced with 4 children, adult children. I live between France, Scotland, and the Philippines.
I became interested in transsexualism many years ago, and in the early 2000s began to research the phenomenon thoroughly. This identified that I'm actually a gynandromorphophilic. Yeah, that's a big word. Attracted, which means I am attracted to trans women. However, this sits alongside my heterosexuality and does not conflict with it. The research led to a fact-based book of fiction, The Warm Pink Jelly Express Train, which is just now undergoing a 3rd edition. This tried to address the dynamics of romance between a straight man and a trans woman.
He says, I began visiting the Philippines in 2012 and go every year for 5 months or more. I've spent much time with traditional Filipino families, including 6 weeks living in a fully matriarchal village. This opened my eyes about the lives of trans women and other gender nonconforming individuals in this culture. Visits to other countries in the area have confirmed that the situation is similar. My blog at rodfleming.com discusses this in detail.
Although when I began visiting, I was open about Dr. Ray Blanchard's theory. It quickly became obvious that he was right. There are 2 types of trans women, and even in this Philippines, where they grow up alongside each other, they are completely distinct and usually readily identifiable.
Both types, while complaining of discrimination in some areas of life, clearly do have a social space in the society wherein they are accepted. Understanding how this and what, if anything, it might mean for other cultures has become the focus of my interest in this area.
And now welcome to the show, Mr. Rod Fleming.
Thank you. Good evening to you both. Good evening.
A little while ago, we thought everything was live,
and
it didn't. The broadcast wasn't showing live, so
we have Janice joining us. Says hello.
Okay, we've got a bunch of people watching.
We have a bunch of people watching,
Janice,
and they're going to probably ask questions during the show and stuff like that. So yeah,
it's so we want to thank you. I know it's 2 o'clock in the morning, or actually now 2:08 in the morning in France, and it's actually 6 p.m. here in New Mexico. So we're very grateful that you actually are joining us, even though it's rather late where you're at.
You're welcome. So, I'll just have a rest.
You'll just have a
I'll just have a rest in the morning. It's okay. I set my own hours these days, so it's not really a problem.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great way of living. Lynn actually found your blog doing research on autogynephilia, because to me it's very interesting, the whole different dynamic, and I've done a lot of research on Blanchard, and I totally agree with his theory, although the trans community has tried to villainize him and literally like burn him at the stake. And I know that you actually do believe in his theories that there are 2 types of trans women.
What I would say is that it fits the evidence. When you go and meet large numbers of trans women, you go, well, there's 2 different types. And how do you explain this? And the only credible explanation I've ever heard is Blanchard's. If you take Blanchard and you reduce it, and you take away, because autogynephiles are often very offended by the idea that it's a fetish, the idea that it's a paraphilia. These are technical terms,
right.
Paraphilia particularly. If you take it down to, as Alice Dreger did, she said, it's like a really powerful attraction to the idea of being a woman. And if you bring it down to that, it's not really offensive. And it does explain what's going on. It does actually, that's what it is. HSTS, homosexual transgenders, are really easy because it's obvious. They tend to have body type clustering. They tend to, certainly in Southeast Asia, they're all pretty similar looking, with slightly built.
And we'll get more.
Go on.
into that in more detail. Right now, I want to talk a little bit more about you and like your interest and love of photography and writing. What really got you into that?
Into, well,
photography and writing. Yeah.
Writing, I've always written, you know, since I was a kid. I was always writing stories and articles. And photography I got into when I was 11. As I said to you earlier, one summer holiday, nothing to do, nobody in the house. I was, you know, looking around the house, and I found a camera, a Leica, and I was like 10 years old, you know, beautiful, shiny, silvery thing. And so I thought, what am I going to do with this? I really want it. Fortunately, there was a manual with it, a book, an instruction book, a big thick one, you know. I still got it, actually. And I thought, what I'll do is I'll read the book, learn how to take pictures, and I'll show my parents what I can do. And that's what I did. And after a few weeks, I was able to actually get a roll of film exposed properly and took some pictures. They weren't great, but they were my first pictures, and showed them to my mother, who was amazed because she didn't know one end of a camera from the other, and said, well, we're going to speak to your dad. And my father, who was the same, he couldn't take pictures. He went, okay, I'm beat. You have the camera. And that's how I got started as a photographer. And I was 11. I had my first darkroom. Nobody has darkrooms anymore, you know. But I had my first darkroom when I was 11.
Wow. So you're pretty much, you know, it was an innate thing. It was something that love at first sight type of thing when you first saw your first camera.
So has your career actually taken you to different avenues and areas of photography? I mean, I read that you were also like a sports
oh yeah, I was very well known as a sports photographer for many, many years. It's a very lucrative business in those days. Print journalism was, yeah, it used to make a lot of money. Sports, news, features, everything. You know, I'm a journalistic photographer. I'm a you know, a reportage photographer, photojournalist. But I also did things like, you know, as you're a freelance, when you're a freelance, you take any job that's going. They phone up and say, can you do this? And you say, yeah. And then you figure out after, you know. So, yeah, I've always done that.
That's definitely an awesome thing. So,
in fact, go on.
And the books as well.
Yeah.
On a page, he's done, you know, the Spring Run, Why Men Made God, The Children of Aldebarad,
The Warm Pig Jelly Express Train, French Onion Soup, and what's that other one?
A Kiss for Christmas, and Poaching the River.
You've been a busy writer.
Yeah.
Busy
yeah, I tend to do my writing when I'm in the Philippines because it's kind of relaxed and I can usually get a lot done. So
that's you use your translating friends as a muse, and they inspire your creativity.
Yeah, they usually have the television on far too loud while I'm working, but that's another thing.
So you were actually married before, and you have 4 adult children, you say.
Yeah, I was married 25 years.
So for 5 years you were married?
25.
Oh,
25.
Wow.
Big difference.
Wow.
25. Yeah. That's a,
Quarter century. Yeah.
Wow.
And you know, sometimes relationships come to an end. I don't really want to go into detail about it because it would be embarrassing for my ex.
There's no need for that. No, I mean,
we still talk, you know, and we talk about, you know, things that concern the kids.
Right. Yeah. Not sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes things don't last forever, and I believe people grow, and sometimes they grow together, and sometimes they can grow apart. You know, and
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happens.
One of those things. So let's pull another question out here. And
how did you become interested in transsexual women?
That's a very good question, because it's not one that's an obvious thing. I can tell you a few things that I think were precursors. When I was, I must have been 10 or 11. Do you know the story of April Ashley? She's a very famous trans woman. There's a big legal case in the 1960s when I was a kid, in which she was not really divorced. The judge decided it wasn't actually divorced because, you know, they were never really married. But that was very much on the radio at the time. And I can remember listening to this on the radio, and the way that the adults around me acted, because they all went very much like, let's not talk about this. And of course, when you do that in front of a child, the child immediately goes, now that must be interesting. So that was the first time I was aware of it.
And
it just, when I was at school, I went to study at art school, and I'm sure it's the same now. In fact, I know it's the same now, but there's a very big gay community in Edinburgh at that time, and a significant number of trans women amongst the, on the fringes of this community, whom I met. No, I didn't date them or anything. They were all they were all HSTS, and they were all intensely shy. That's the thing I remembered most about them, was they were incredibly shy. And just trying to get them to talk about themselves was really difficult. And usually I can get people to talk, And I remember being sort of like, that's a very interesting thing, And at the same time, I wasn't really, attracted in that way. I was interested, but not attracted. And then I guess I became aware later, I guess in the 1990s that, yeah, I was actually attracted. And it went from there. Of course, the first time I actually met a trans woman, that was, in the context of a relationship. That's what we discussed earlier. It's an interesting moment.
Yeah, we were talking before we went live that you actually enjoy having a relationship with a trans woman. You're not what you would call a typical tranny chaser that is just out for the, the experimentation process or anything like that. You've actually have enjoyed.
I absolutely hate one-night stands and these kind of, that kind of relationship. I don't like them. And I tend to be, I date people I like. That's certainly true. I would never date someone that I didn't like. And I think if you like someone and you're becoming intimate with them, then it's natural you just want to have a relationship with them. I've sort of lost your picture there. Can you still hear me? Hello? I don't know what it says on my. Ah, you're still there. Hi.
Our basic seems to me, Alex. Hello.
I'm sorry, I kind of lost the signal there, and I'm not really hearing you too clearly.
No, he's there. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Good. This day and age, you don't find so many people like that. People are usually out to experiment. I know that as a trans guy, I have experienced a lot of people that wanted to be with me, almost like a science project. And I find that in the trans community, that seems to be a lot, not just with trans women, but also with trans guys. So
I remember going out on a date with a guy who was interested in trans people, and he basically took me to a gay bar, and he said, let me show you where the tranny bar is. And I go, okay. So there were these women on poles dancing and stuff, and they're all beautiful. And they came on to him, and he's like, no, I'm on a date tonight, this kind of thing. And I said, wow, so all of these women, all these trans women have had the surgery? Oh, no, they did not, And I was like, wait a minute, but they want to be women. So, the typical thing would be to have the surgery, right? I mean, even like back in the day, April Ashley, Alicia Brevard, all these different trans women had the surgery done, and they lived in a stealth type of life. And, I mean, it's just like, that was
different time.
It
was a different time because back then they were told not to associate with the gay community, not to associate with others like them, and to just blend in and hide. Today, we don't see that at all. Explain to us a little bit, and I can't pronounce that word. I'm Cuban.
Gynandromorphophilic.
Yeah.
Gynandromorphophilic. Trans attraction. It's just trans.
Okay. And what are your
What
are your views on men that are attracted to trans women? Do you feel that they're straight, gay, or somewhere in between?
Oh, somewhere in between. Mike Bailey, Mike Bailey, obviously, Dr. Mike Bailey, his unit at Northwestern have done quite a lot of work on gynandromorphophilic men. About half of gynandromorphophilic men are actually autogynephilic themselves, right? So they're kind of getting off on this big thing about transition and transformation, and they're feeding off that. And I would have to, although the researchers classify the others as straight because they're not gay, you know, you're not attracted to men, but I believe there is as I said, there has to be a certain amount of bisexualism going on here. You know, if you're a guy, and it doesn't matter how beautiful she is, or how feminine she is, when you get into bed and she has a penis, there has to be a certain amount of, to me, there has to be a certain amount of bisexualism. You don't reject it, you know?
No doubt. Definitely no doubt about it, because heterosexual men are expecting a vagina. They're not
abhorrent to
a
heterosexual
exactly.
man.
And that would be
and I did for decades, many decades. Like I said, the first time that a man like me is with a trans woman, and it's, you know, what do they call it? The moment of truth. It's quite an interesting moment. Because, you know, you find out an awful lot about yourself. And I understand what you're saying. I think some men get hooked on that thrill, that kind of adventure thing. Like, but it's not really fair to the women. It just isn't, you know. I think that some women can deal with it, but a lot of them, they really want something more stable and long-lasting. And it's not fair to people like that, you know. I don't think.
A lot of times, and I was like, just in reading biographies of different older generation trans women, they felt that if they got married, if they had the relationship, if they had the kind of step kid, and if they had all this like validation for who they are or what they were as women, then that was like the goal. You know, it's like Alicia Brevard died this year, and they went through like 3 or 4 different marriages, and we see this happen a lot in HSTS transsexuals, that they can't keep a relationship. It's like they're married to the idea of being married, not to loving a man.
Yeah.
You know,
as we were speaking prior to going on live, that a trans person, whether an MTF or an FTM, they're so self-consumed. And these are individuals that have had problems having relationships in the first place, because I believe there's a lot of social skill problems with transgender people. When they get to have an actual relationship, once they achieve that, they don't know how to keep that actual relationship, because it's no fun having somebody by your side that only thinks about themselves. They forget, hey, I'm here, I'm this other person here in this relationship. It's not just about you.
I think that one thing I would say is that my experience, in that sense, really direct experience. And when I was writing the Worm Pink Jelly Express Train, I was talking online and on the phone to a number of trans women in South America, which involved me having to try to learn Spanish, and it was very difficult, but never mind. Subsequent to that, most of my experience has been in Southeast Asia. Now, in Southeast Asia, the culture is really supportive of particularly trans women, but also, you know, trans men. It comes from the matriarchal nature of traditional culture. It's what I call a two-group society. You've got men don't go to the village. I mean, they're never there. You never see men. They're away working. So women are running the place, and the focus of their lives is home and family. And it means that for young non-conforming males, they have a choice. You know, they can go, right, I can try and be a guy and do the guy stuff, play basketball, you know, be very competitive, do the rough and tumble stuff with the other adolescent boys, or they can stay in this group of gender non-conforming people who include gay males and both types of trans women, and they all grow up together, usually around the volleyball court, because for some reason, I think it's because it's contact. You know, basketball is a contact sport, volleyball isn't. And this group, you find them hanging around the volleyball court in any village in this place. You'll find them; they're all there, and they'll be in various states from maybe even sometimes before puberty to maybe sort of 18, 17, 18. And they're really learning about life. And I think to an extent, they do learn something about how to have a relationship, because there's a lot of interchange, between older people. Older, they call themselves Beckies. That's the local word. The polite local Filipino word is Becky. There are others, but they're not so polite. And they see themselves as all the same. They don't draw a distinction between a masculine presenting gay male or either type of trans woman. They think, well, that's it. We're all women inside. That's what they think. That we're all women inside. And so the older trans women who are still in contact, and they're always around, they might be away working, they might have moved to the city, but they always come back at weekends and stuff like that. And they're basically, they're like mentors. That's the word. They're like mentors for the younger group. So I guess that they're trying to, there's an element of transmission of experience,
Right. It's a different type of dynamic out in the West than in the East or in other places. Right. I find the trans women here are so focused on the mirror, on their looks.
Yeah, but this is the thing, though. What you're saying is that these trans, identifying people or gender non-conforming people in Southeast Asia, they're actually being socialized as women. Isn't that what you're saying?
Very nearly. I think that I would say that they socialize as Beckies.
Beckies.
Right, which is not quite the same thing as women. Right. We've got a group of women there as well. Right. There's a lot of interchange between them. Evening party. Filipinos love parties.
So we could
if you're hanging with a trans girlfriend, then there will be also women there and other Beckies. And very few men. Men who are there will be boyfriends who are sitting somewhat uncomfortably,
We're
as you can imagine.
Like cultures back in the day, how they had a special place for their gender non-conforming
people, and they did things with women. It wasn't about wearing makeup, heels, right, and looking in front of a mirror all day and saying, and get people to say how beautiful.
American version of
autogynephilia, which I did remember reading something on one of your pages in your blog that the majority of transgender females here in the United States, in the West, are autogynephiles.
That seems to be the case. I remember reading statistics that said between 60 and 70% were autogynephilic.
Yeah.
I think I think also that you have to remember that a lot of HSTS trans women just vanish. They've gone. As soon as they transition, that's it. They melt into the society, and nobody actually knows. And certainly I'm in contact with a number, through my blog, a number of trans women in the United States who obviously are keeping themselves very anonymous. But that's what they did. They left the town they came from, they went to a new city, invented a new life, and nobody there knows.
And that's...
And I think... Go on.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think that also is one of the reasons why, certainly in those cases, they're very encouraged to have reconstruction surgery, gender reconstruction surgery, genital reconstruction surgery, because they're afraid that if anything happens, they're in a car accident, or they have to go to hospital or something, and somebody finds out that their whole life that they've put together, in anonymity and as women, that's it, lost. And that's really important to them because they need that security,
that's really sad, honestly, because I remember, again, I'm talking about Alicia Brevard and how they lived and they were in the movies and film and TV shows and everything. And then they decided to come out after their career was over, after they couldn't be beautiful anymore. And it was all, it's also very selfish, Rod, it seems to me, that, that these people would invent their own past and create some history about themselves as a girl and all this stuff when they can't be honest with themselves. They can't be honest, like Alicia couldn't be honest with her husband that she was born a man, born a boy. It's just really sad.
And then we hear a lot of individuals that after a certain amount of years consider themselves imposters. They feel lonely because they can't be truthful to anyone. It's like hiding a secret all of your life for a long period of your life. Really, it's got to eat away at your person. It's
I'm sure that's the case. I am absolutely sure that's the case. But because I'm ancient, I mean, I remember what it was like to grow up in the 60s, and, you know, you couldn't be gay. It's just, it would, you know, you'd be beaten to a pulp. It would not be possible. You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so you can see why people hid. You know, I can understand exactly why people hid. You know, not an easy thing to do at all.
In the end, what I find, and I've been doing a lot of research regarding trans women, and in the end, what I find that after the long haul and after they've lived their honeymoon phase and after they've accomplished certain things, in the end, they find they're still not happy because there's this inner voice. And I know because I have felt that inner voice. Yeah. I mean, I transitioned back in 2003, and I would hang around guys, and I was very passable, you know. During the time that I was on testosterone, I was your macho guy and muscles and everything. And I kept hearing this little voice, you are an imposter. When I would shake a guy's hand, I always wanted to out myself. I'm not really what you think I am. Because there was just this sense of I'm lying to people and I'm lying to myself. My belief is that we're not born wrong. And this has taken me a while to come to this conclusion, because I used to wave the flag in the beginning and thinking I'm going to be happy if I do this, that, and the other. And in the end, it's like you're still not happy because you're lying to yourself. No one, in my opinion, is born in the wrong body. Our brains and our body are not two different things. They work together. I believe that people go about doing this because we have some sort of childhood trauma. Something's missing in our life. We didn't have a good fatherly figure. We got made fun of in school. We wanted to fit in, so we created this so-called reality. I mean, and that's my opinion.
I think I'm sympathetic to that view. I think it's one of the things I would say is that nobody likes to have secrets. Yeah. Secrets are terrible things because you actually want people to know. A secret is only good if there's a number of other people who know it. You know, that's a good secret because it's like our secret. But a secret that only you have, that's a real burden. That's a terrible thing to carry. You know, and I do sympathize.
One lie leads to another lie and to another lie. And before you know it, you're like, you feel like a damn liar. You feel like an imposter.
Yeah. I mean,
I think you have to look inside yourself and wonder, if it's that level that all the time you're living in a, you know, the trans women that I know in the Philippines and in Thailand, but mainly the Philippines, are mainly pretty well-adjusted people. And some of them have had really tough backgrounds, you know, because Philippines is a two-group society. So you have a very patriarchal masculine society and a very matriarchal feminine society, males and female society. And the women tend to protect the Beckys. Like I said, it's like, you know, don't touch them, they're okay, leave them alone. But the fathers can be extremely violent. I mean, that's a culture where beating children is normal. It happens all the time. And I have heard some hair-raising stories. There's a very well-known trans woman called Kevin Ballett. She keeps her guy name. Beautiful, beautiful woman, and you've probably seen pictures of her. And she tells about how her father chained her up in the backyard of the farm that they lived on, beat her, and you think, that's a terrible thing to live with, you know, to live through, you know. So they don't always have it easy, but they do seem to be fairly well adjusted.
I think it's because of the different culture altogether. And I think our capitalistic society really creates a lot of egocentric individuals, and people have a different way of, you know, being and reacting to things.
And honestly, the transgender umbrella has been opened wide to accept everybody and anybody who would ever want to identify as a trans woman, and then they call them that. Right. So it's like, there's like, you know, oh, you're this, oh, you must be, you know, and this is directly the fault of these gender therapists who take these people and they tell them, oh, you were born in the wrong body, you need to transition, let's get you on hormones. And, you know, Dr. Harry Benjamin would have looked at those people and said, no, not on your life. Yeah. Not on your life.
And they're harming people because people leave their people leave their families and believe that one day they're going to be this beautiful woman, and they're
going to take off.
Yeah, I'm going to take off. And then as the years progress and they fill their bodies full of hormones that are giving them cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and all these things, and they keep looking in the mirror and they're like, I'm not looking much like what I was promised. And then they left all what they had in the past to follow this dream that turns out to be a nightmare.
I wanted to ask you, Rob, do they actually age gracefully, these trans women in the Philippines?
Do they age gracefully? Oh, that's an interesting one, because there's a huge amount of desistance. Huge.
Oh, wow.
What you'll find is an awful lot of people, when their beauty fades, they just change back.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
They've had, it's kind of like they've had that time, when they could be beautiful and they could really be head turners. Oh, you're gorgeous. And then they get to maybe 35 to 40, and that's it. That's it. And what happens is that
it's like the mirror can only lie to you so much. Mirror on the wall.
Can only do so much.
No, actually, we find, and we've done research on this, that hormones, I don't know if you've heard of the term diminishing returns, where, you go so far in the pendulum, and then the pendulum's going, nope, we're going back, because the body is fighting you. The body will fight you. What goes up will come down.
The one thing that I have found is that HSTS trans women tend to need, or they appear to need, much lower doses of hormones. They're very feminine already, so they don't seem to need the really big doses.
A lot of them are probably intersex qualities. That's why they have the little petite bodies, and they're like, they look like beautiful women, even though they were born men, because there's some sort of androgen sensitivity, some sort of
I completely agree with that. I think that those individuals don't really fully masculinize. Even as they get older, they don't fully masculinize. And in the Philippines, the other thing is that whether or not you think you're, no matter how you see yourself, okay, as a male GNC, or Becky, the culture will always see you as a man, right? Now, males have responsibilities in these societies, specifically to their parents, to keep them and to make sure that, because there's no pensions. The pensions are terrible. Even if you contribute all your life, you get like $30 a month. It's nothing. So there's a pressure at some stage that's like, you're going to have to get a decent job now. And it's not that easy for trans women to get decent work. So cut your hair, go and get a job,
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of pressure on them to do that, to desist,
You were gonna
and like I say, once the looks start to go, they go, hell yeah, well, I've had my fun. I've had that 20 years of my life when I was gorgeous and everybody thought I was wonderful. And there are exceptions. There are definitely exceptions, but I think that's a fairly general rule.
And it's like, here in the United States, particularly, there are those that they decide to desist as well. There was a well-known person that was a cheerleader on the Dallas Cowboys or something, and they lived their life, enjoyed, and then later they detransitioned and stuff. But what I find is that the ones that don't detransition are the ones that are the autogynephiles. They, or they had a hint of autogynephilia in them being an HSTS, because I think it kind of overlaps sometimes. And you see these people, they break their face and they try to become more and more feminine, and it's not working.
No.
And they keep, taking the Snapchat pictures, and they keep putting their old videos from maybe if they were a model back in the 1980s or something. And there's one young trans HSTS that said, wow, I've wanted to think that things were going to get better in the future, but it seems like all of these beautiful trans women in the past, these idols of mine, they look like monsters now. And they're like, I don't want to age. And this is the kind of person that probably, after they've had their run, they're going to detransition because they don't want to be an ugly woman. They'd rather be a regular looking dude.
And I find that after you break your face and you take all these hormones, it's like was it Revenge of
Montezuma's Revenge,
where what goes up must come down. Now the surgeries start to really like melt. It looks like the melting people, and they age so terribly. And I think what happens is, no, not I think, I know what happens is that estradiol ages biological men, and testosterone ages biological female. There's something that it's almost like the body fights you, and we've been doing a lot of research and like, oh my God, they look better when they started. 3 years after using hormones, they look older and they look more masculine.
Another thing to remember is that if you take too, certainly with the estrogen, is converted into testosterone in the liver.
Right.
And I definitely do know women, trans women, who are just, you know, they're wolfing it and you know, it's like, cut it out, slow down.
Right.
You take
and
too much.
With a biological male, it
well,
doesn't take much for it to be excessive estrogen. You only require 35, anything in excess of 35 ml, whatever the measurement is. It actually creates cancers, creates heart disease, creates strokes, creates all sorts of medical problems.
I know, and I'm going to admit that my girlfriend is like this. I mean, she takes one birth control pill a day. And I'm not going to show you a picture because it just wouldn't be fair. But she's just stunning and totally feminine. That's what I mean. The HSTS, they often just don't need a lot of, and she just takes it because she says, oh, it keeps my skin nice, you know. You know, she is already incredibly feminine and 5'1", tiny.
Right.
And, you know, she walks down the street and nobody even notices, you know.
Right.
One thing I would say is that I think it would be helpful if there was less emphasis on identity. Because if people were, I think, less, you know, like you have to be committed to being a trans woman or a trans man, and you have to do that for the rest of your life. And if there wasn't the sense that you will be rejected by this community that you're a part of because you change your identity, then I think life would be easier. Because people could go, okay, fine, you know, I'm 40.
Yeah, you know? And it wouldn't be so much about the medicalization of it. It's just being who you are and
your essence.
Be your essence. Not about your procedures and the hormones which are going to kill you. You know, just be you. And I think that's the message that we're trying to give. People say we're haters and we're transphobic. It's like, no, we're trying to tell people, please just be you. Don't harm yourself trying to chase something that will never be, because sex is unchangeable.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that all adults have the right to take their lives along the path that they want to take them. You know, as long as they are sure in their own minds that that's where they want to go, and they've done the research, then it's your own body, it's your own life. But I don't think other people should make it more difficult for them either to follow that path, or if at the end of the day, well, you know, maybe not. I want to go back to another way of living. There should not also be obstacles to that decision either. It should be like, okay, fine. And certainly, you know, I know people which makes me laugh sometimes. People in the Philippines, and quite literally, on what is it? You know, beautiful girl, beautiful makeup, long, because they're very, very good at makeup. Lovely long hair, just looking absolutely great. The next time you meet them, she's a guy. I got a new job. You know, I got a new job. I can't be a girl. I've got a new job. All right, okay. And you go back the year after, and they're back being a girl, and you go, well, I got fired. Really, literally, that happens all the time. You know, and it's like,
well, that's the two-spirit nature.
Nobody. No, that's fine. You know, and I think part of it is because the fact that they do have this idea that it doesn't matter how you express yourself, you're still a woman inside. You're still Becky. See? So they don't distinguish between the types. So that it's actually quite easy to people to migrate from one presentation to another.
And I wouldn't want to say that they know they're a woman inside, because it's like, you know, you have this essence inside. Like it doesn't matter. I was a very beautiful woman, long curly hair. But even though with that long curly and beautiful hair, when I cut my hair, and I wasn't on any hormone, I was like 19, I had this essence. I always have this very masculine, or yet very, you know, and you've seen my essence, a very nurturing, loving, you know, it's like
that's what nursed me back to health.
Yeah,
you know, after I had my accident.
And I think that's what's beautiful. And it's not because I have a man inside. No, it's just that I have, and we all have this masculine, feminine essence, yin and yang.
Absolutely, yeah, you're right. It's very much to do with the culture. And there's a guy called Professor Don Kulik. I don't know if you've heard of him. And now, where did he used to be? He used to be in one of the northeastern universities. I don't know where he is now. Anyway, when in the 1990s, he spent a year, he's gay, he spent a year living in a house full of travesti, that's basically transgender prostitutes working in Brazil. And he lived in this house for a year. He's an anthropologist. And he wrote a book called Travesti, which is a very interesting read. And that's where I first came across the idea of the best explanation I'd ever heard of this traditional two-group society. And he expresses it slightly differently from me. He calls them the two groups, men and not men and everybody else. And the male group, the point is the male group is competitive to get into. You know, you have to be, good at fighting, good at picking up women. You have to be good at drinking. It's really important everywhere you go. I don't know what it is about guys, Alcohol is a big part of it. Whereas for the Beckys and for the ones who, I don't want to do that. I'd rather just stay home, play volleyball, hang with the other Beckys, they're not women in Brazil, not men in Brazil, rather. It's just, so they don't actually have to make, they can just stay where they are. Because we all grow up at home, Yeah. We're all born at home, raised at home. And those who remain, the Beckys, they just don't go out and join the man group, the away group. And so they just stay put.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting dynamic because they actually don't make that much effort. They might make an effort to be beautiful and to make the most of what they have, but they all see the masculine side of things as being much tougher because the guys have to go away and work, often in quite horrible jobs, and places like the Philippines they'll work frequently away from home, in other countries, be away for a year at a time. And you can see why people go, And also there's a case going on in the Philippines right now, which is really quite tragic. It's a young man was killed, or he died during a frat hazing incident, And this sort of thing is actually quite common in these cultures because, the standard for acceptance into masculinity, if you like, is really high. So people get hurt. So you can see why Becky's go, I don't want any part of that.
It's a different culture altogether. That's why I said this whole trans movement here that has blown up dramatically. It's very fetishistic. It's very, and hanging out with the girls on the weekend, and they go out, and it's very, I don't know. It just has something not natural to it, and not.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
To it,
very perversion type of thing, and it's just, and then they're very.
I think it's kind of like a pseudo society. It's like when you see it in the traditional culture, it's very natural. It's actually it's very okay. You've got this sort of grey area between the sexes and genders, and it's filled by a fairly amorphous group of people who sometimes look like women, sometimes they look like guys. Depends on where they are in their life.
Definitely.
We don't have that in the West. We don't have a tradition like that.
Mm-mm.
So
very abnormal.
You can't just now we're going to do it. It's a very difficult thing to do, and especially because in my what I've seen says that the whole of in the Philippines, and it's the same in all the other cultures in the area. They just have different names, It's based on these matriarchal communities, and it's all over the place. Even in big cities, they're all, when you break them down into the smallest groups, they're little matriarchal communities, and they're built around the grandmother, who's called Lola. And the grandmother is boss. Nobody argues with grandma, Absolutely not. And she's in control of the men also because they're her sons. So, and it's like, yeah, mom, I'm going to behave when I come home, So they're intensely matriarchal.
Beautiful thing.
And it's a function of that, the relaxed attitude towards the non-conforming people is a function of that mother-centered society, or rather grandmother-centered.
And here it's more like the trans women want to control everything and beat people across the head if they don't see the things they want to see. And that's a massive problem, very massive problem. They're disrespectful towards women. They're disrespectful towards each other. They're just, they have this very narcissistic type of behavior. And it comes from the patriarchal system,
It's just the society of men. I mean, you got that in the Philippines too, but it's separated. The point is they're not together. They're separated. So guys are guys with other guys, and it doesn't affect a thing. I don't want to be rude, but are either of you Catholics?
No.
I think there is a certain relationship between Catholicism and this intense centered on the mother thing, because particularly in the Philippines, they're what's called Marianist Catholics. They're very traditional Catholics, and the center of the whole culture is Mary, So that it gives a kind of relevance and a centrality to women and motherhood because of the centrality of the deity, and we're talking here about a very religious community, a very, very religious place.
And they probably mix it with their native island beliefs as well. It probably has a mixture of that matriarchal influence of the Philippine culture,
which is a beautiful, culture. And the matriarchal system is a beautiful system, versus the patriarchy that we're living in the United States.
The problem is that the reason it works in the Philippines is that you actually have both. You have the patriarchy and the matriarchy, and they work in a complementary sense. The guys go out and work, and they send the money home. And you ask the women, and you say, "Well, who runs the thing?" "Oh, we run it. We run it. The guys send us money, but we decide what we're going to do with the money."
Right.
So things are really worked out, and it's like, okay, that's everybody's happy. And when they come home at the weekends, the guys behave themselves because Lola, that's grandma, is there like, you can't come here and start causing trouble. So it's an efficient system, it works, but we don't have it.
Not here.
I had a question from a viewer here called Moondog. They said, did Rod address in this interview that non-autogynephiles are quote unquote true transgenders? On his channel, he says this, I believe, but I think some gay men want to just be able to walk down the street with their boyfriend holding hands and not have people stare at them or want to attack them because some people think men being affectionate towards other men is gross. I myself don't find the sight of two men kissing gross, but I am aware that there are some people who would physically attack two men holding hands down the street.
Yeah, that certainly does happen. Regarding the true transsexual thing, that was the old term. That was the old terminology before Blanchard changed it to HSTS and autogynephilic. The thing about HSTS is that because they have all these physical traits that are clustered together, they're really an identifiable group, and it doesn't matter where you go in the world, you can see them. Whereas the autogynephilic ones are very disparate. They're just all different. They're not the same at all. I mean, I know autogynephilic trans women who are 6'3" and massive, and the other ones who are 5'2". It's very, but the HSTS are always easy to spot. And when sex researchers started to look at that, people like Hirschfeld and Havelock Ellis, they found the HSTS really, it was like, yeah, that's what your transsexual is. And it was only later, obviously, gynephiles started coming forward saying, well, actually, no, we have these sensations and feelings as well. So for a long time, it was the HSTS were regarded as the true. I don't use that term unless I'm trying to make a point. What was the other thing that your correspondent said there?
They said something about that some gay men just want to be able to walk down the street with their boyfriend.
I honestly don't think that. I mean, you're maybe better placed to tell me than that. I honestly don't think that is the primary motivation for an HSTS to transition. That she wants to walk down the street with her boyfriend and hold hands, and get away with it and hide. Certainly in the Philippines, it has often been said to me that it's far easier for a gay man to get sex and to have a partner than a trans woman. It's really difficult for trans women to get partners. That's one of the reasons they tend to like Western males, because the local guys won't have anything to do with them.
And the thing is, though, with a lot of what they call the twinks or the very small, gay men, they have a hard time finding relationships in the gay community. They get made fun of. So what a lot of them, and especially nowadays, what a lot of them are doing is they figure, if I transition, I'll blend in as a woman and I'll be able to find a straight guy, because that's what they want, a straight guy that's financially well off, that's going to marry them and so forth and so on. But little do they know that, this straight guy is going to want a woman to give him children. Kids. And an HSTS can't do that.
I have been asked this many times, and I always say to young trans women who are doing that sort of thing that don't even think about guys who are in their 20s or 30s, because they'll hit 35 and guys have biological clocks just like women, and bang, that's going to be it. They'll dump you. They will dump you for a woman who can give them the family. And if you've invested, for a trans woman, as you said earlier, she's invested maybe 10 or 15 years of her life, and her looks will start to be fading by that stage. This is bad news. This is really bad news. She's actually better off with an older guy who is financially stable, has maybe had kids, isn't going to go down that path. And let's be quite blunt, is probably over the moon to have an absolutely gorgeous young person, as his partner. And so there is a certain sense in which that works. That really does work.
The sad thing is, though, and I've known because I knew a lot of trans women when I lived back in Florida. I knew this older gentleman who had a lot of money, he was well off, and he was very much attracted to trans women. And he moved one into his home, and he tried to have a relationship with them. And at the end, the young trans woman was probably trying to find something more attractive to her eyes, used the older gentleman for what they needed, and then dumped him. And then now they're single, and it's like, because they think in their mind they're going to find this Prince Charming that's going to sweep them off their feet, and it's like, ain't going to happen.
I think that's true, and I think that a lot of girls, that's it's, again, I think one of the things that kind of works against that is that in Asia, older men are highly respected. Mm-hmm. There's a big attraction towards older men, and women will often prefer older men anyway, as well, and I think that comes from the kind of thing you also find in China, where age is associated with wisdom, and especially if you've had a success, you get status. A woman can get status from her husband because he's done well, and that's important. She goes back to the group of women, and it's like, look what I've got as a boyfriend, and maybe a husband, and trans women, Becky's in the Philippines, it's the same in Thailand, anywhere in that area, Vietnam, they're all the same. They are the lowest status of all. Within the village, which is run by women, right at the bottom of the heap, you've got the trans women. And then you've got the single mothers, who are above them. And then you've got the ones who've got good husbands and they've got families and they maybe got a car, and that sort of thing. And it's quite stratified like that. So one thing that an Asian trans woman can do in a situation like that if she goes home with a Western boyfriend, and remember the perception is that all Westerners are stinking rich, which is obviously not true, you know, but that's local perception. She goes home with a local boyfriend, and her status just goes woof, straight up there, you know, because, oh gosh, you know, look, really? Really? You actually managed to get a boyfriend like that? Do you understand? And that's a real attraction, you know. Mm-hmm. The other side of that is, if the girl were ever to cheat on that man, that would be regarded as a disgrace by the family. And so she would find herself in, you know, not in trouble, but she would find herself rejected by the family. If the family turned around and said that, you know, he was looking after you, which means he was looking after us and all the rest of it, and you cheated on him or whatever, and now he's gone, she's going to get it in the neck, you know, from all the other women. You know, she's really going to get a hard time, and her status will go through the floor. So there's a lot of social dynamic going on here that is just not present in the West.
Oh, not at all. The West is just a total different ballgame.
It is, unfortunately.
Now, Dr. Ray Blanchard has been given a bad rap by the trans community and trans activists, especially the AGB types. Can you explain why the theory is true, yet has been in the trans community's eyes discredited?
Well, the first thing I would say is that if you go to any place where there are fairly large populations of trans women, it's immediately obvious that there are two types. It just is. You know, there's basically the small, cute, they're sometimes quite tall, but they'll be slightly built. There's that group, and then you've got the rest, you know. So it's quite clear that there are two types. As I said, the HSTS were called homosexual transsexuals. They were called the true type for forever, you know, until Blanchard came along and developed a theory that would allow him to prescribe GRS for the other group. I think Alice Dreger has written quite a lot about this. It's quite interesting what she says, that the trouble with, you know, in autogynephilia, to explain, may I just quickly explain what happens in autogynephilia, is that the subject, we're talking about a male who's attracted to women, right? It's a straight guy. But he fixates on himself as his sexual target. Because he's straight, that has to be a woman, right? He's not gay. He's not going to be turned on by the idea of his own body because it's a guy body. So it has to become a female body. And to animate that in his head, he develops a second character who's the woman who motivates this body. And this becomes a real character. And eventually it can take over completely. And that then is when the person's dysphoria goes bang, he can't live as a guy anymore, has to come out. But remember, that character always was a woman. I mean, it was invented as a woman. So as far as it's concerned, it's a woman. And anybody who queries that is really going to get a severe reaction. Exactly. And it's called a narcissistic rage response, because you've just taken the chair out from under them. You know, all that house of cards that they've built up, you've just gone like that, taken out the bottom card, and the whole lot goes bang. And you're left confronted with a very angry man, you know, who's just had all that stuff taken away. And that's unfortunately what's happened in the Blanchard case. And it helps no one, because I honestly don't think, in fact, I'm sure that Ray Blanchard never meant to do any harm to trans women of any kind whatsoever.
Of course not, you know.
And I think he was motivated by a desire to help, but it didn't do him any great favors, did it?
No, because then you had the
Paul McHugh and
the trans woman that attacked him. Andrea
James
and Lynn Conway and all these. I mean, it's just that narcissistic rage that you speak of, which we've read a lot about. They just wanted to destroy this man. How dare you question us? How dare you? And you could see it. Like you said, it's so clear.
The same thing is happening to Jordan Peterson over in Canada. You know, he's getting grilled over his pronoun, desire to just be himself and be able to express things as he sees it. And, there's these people just hounding him and hounding him.
Yeah. Because they don't see anything but what they want to see, and they don't realize there's biology. You can't go against biology. You can identify and express however you want, but when you start telling people that you are what you say you are because you say you are, then that's just lunacy. That's just total lunacy. And that's what autogonophilics end up doing.
It doesn't work. The thing about Jordan Peterson is that, a lot of people have picked him up. I know you haven't. It's worth saying that he has no problem calling trans women she and her. That's what he does. His problem was with like aerogender and calling people je and je and things like that. And he went, I'm not learning all these new words, which is a perfectly fair point of view, because you are, trans women are feminine, so we call them she, and trans men are masculine, so we call them he. And you're looking at, look at you, I'm looking at a guy, Do you know what I mean? It's not. I'm not being asked to suspend my disbelief. I look at you and I go, yeah. It's obvious, because people call them stereotypical gender roles, but the fact is that is what actually keeps society together.
But one of the things
you actually when you talk to someone.
One of the things, though, that really upsets people is that trans people are forcing people to use these pronouns. And then so you're asking somebody who does not agree that a male could ever be a she, you're asking them to lie. You're asking them to change the way that they feel and think about something to make somebody else feel better. And so they're not having compassion, these trans people, for other people. They just want to get their way. To me, they're like a child having a temper tantrum.
I think I have a lot of sympathy with what you're saying. At the same time, I have been with a trans woman that I was close to when she was being aggressively, it's happened many times, but aggressively misgendered. Because the long-term relationship that I had, or the longest one I had, was the girl's actually autogynophilic. I mean, she's 6 foot, she's a supermodel. She's utterly stunning, but she's autogynophilic. And in a place like the Philippines, where all the women are 5'2" or less, you're kidding. You're just kidding. It's just never going to happen. And I remember being with her on a number of occasions when someone else was aggressively calling her he and him and all the rest. And it is very uncomfortable. It's just aggressive. It's just impolite. I think that politeness is important.
If it's done in malice, then I could understand if somebody's just being a bully. But if somebody genuinely, does not see that,
doesn't know,
or doesn't see that person's essence as a she, or just it's against a religion, against whatever, then that person should have a right to either just call them by their name or not give them that validation. Because I find that a lot of trans people, they live for validation.
Oh yes.
It's I don't know.
It's a huge part of the life.
Totally.
I think to an extent, it kind of, as you said, it kind of takes people over, the idea of validation. It becomes everything.
It becomes tunnel vision, and it becomes this project. It becomes this mission, and they're going to tear people down that don't bow down to their ideology or to whatever they think people should see, and they become aggressive, and like what they did to Blanchard and what they did to Dr. Peterson, and it's just crazy. Anyway, do you think watching transsexual she-male porn creates an interest in the lifestyle, either becoming trans or becoming a trans chaser?
I think it probably does, certainly for trans chasers. Yeah, I think that. I mean, female porn is a huge, huge market, and somebody's buying it. So whether all of the men who are using it are actually interested in trans women as partners, I don't know. I don't think so. So from the point of view of people wanting to become trans, I think for autogynophilic men, yes, I think it is actually an important pathway. Because remember, they already have that low-level desire, and if there's stimulus to make it stronger, then it can rise up, you know, and I think that's happening. Most men who have autogynephilia will later say that they started to have feelings quite early on in their teens. You know, some will say they had actually before puberty, but you're never really sure about that. But they certainly will talk about having their first feelings and their first experiences of that autoeroticism in their teens, but they kept it down. But it's certainly the case that, I mean, that's why these men will engage transsexual sex workers, autogynephilic transsexual sex workers particularly, is because they like the contact with somebody else who's done it. You know, it's kind of that affirmation of themselves in this case. I remember having a conversation many years ago now with a transsexual sex worker in New York, and she kept, and I believe this is quite common, she kept an outside set of women's lingerie for the use of her clients. Which actually shocked me at the time, because I was like, what? Yeah.
And then to me, it's a big stepping stone. Getting back to the porn, first I start watching the porn, and then they start dating trans women, because it's like, okay, can you bring your wig and your dress in the day, because they want to wear it. And I think that it's almost like a programming. We had a guest, which we're having again next Tuesday, Jen Smith, who talks about this trans cult, and there's like this trans programming that's taking place where they're actually demasculinizing a lot of men, you know, and it's just like this really strange thing that's happening. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that for autogynephilia, you know, as I said, about half of all gynandromorphophilic men are AGP themselves. They're autogynephilic. And so they are interested, they've got these feelings about being a woman themselves. And proximity to trans women will get them going. A lot of autogynephilic trans women are attracted to trans women anyway. And, you know, there's a lot of mixture going on there. I think for the other group, one thing I would say is the autogynephilic men, those GAMP men, they're sometimes called GAMP, by the way, to make it shorter. It's even worse than gynandromorphophilic. They tend to be attracted to the women the trans women who've done really major surgeries. You know, so they've got backsides this wide, you know, and these enormous silicone, you know what I mean? And their faces are all pumped full of, and it's like, my God, they look like caricatures. They look like, and it's awful. Autogynephilic men who are attracted to trans women, they like that. They think that's absolutely great. That's what they go for. It's almost like this living Barbie doll thing. It's a very strange thing. Whereas I think it's fair to say that men like me don't like that at all. We go for a very natural, you know, no silicone.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been attracted to all this, you know, even breast implants. To me, there's nothing more beautiful than the natural small breasts, or just even nipples, just whatever. I mean, this whole, you have to do all these things to yourself to claim that you're being your authentic self. Well, how can you be your authentic self when nothing about you is authentic? Everything is silicone and artificial. And that's
absolutely agree. And I think to an extent that there is a degree of manipulation goes on as well. You know, that the trans women, they know that these kind of guys like this kind of stuff, you know, and so, oh, should I do that? And it kind of gets into a cycle of, you know, a vicious cycle where the further they go along this path, the further they have to go, you know. And certainly I've known girls make a really hell of a mess of themselves.
Oh no! And then they end up getting sick. They get leukemia. They get cancer. They get all sorts of stuff. And now they're alone because they, you know, it's just such. I personally tell people, and I will always tell people, do not transition. Express, be yourself. Leave the kids alone. Now this craze of all these gender clinics coming up, and they're trying to transition kids at a young. It's like eugenics. It's eugenics. It's crazy. Yeah. You know.
It's insanity. It's craziness. My view is that an HSTS will probably transition anyway. At some stage in her life, you know, she's going to go, right, that's me, I'm gone. And they've always been there because, I mean, these people have been recorded. They're in the hymns of to Inanna, the hymns to Inyana, which is the oldest literature we have, written 3,500 BCE. They talk about transsexuals. In the Hindu Vedas, which is the basis of the Hindu religion, they're written between 3000 BCE and 1500 BCE. They discuss all different types that we know, you know, of different types of gay men, of different types of trans women, trans men. It's all in there. It's all discussed. So there's nothing new about all of this. What's new in the West, particularly, this is idea of it as a cult. You know, it's almost like a career for your kids, you know.
And the medicalization of it, which is very dangerous and unnatural.
Because that wasn't around 3500 BC. I mean,
people just were.
With their essence.
Right.
You know, they were just who they were.
And that's beautiful.
It wasn't a matter of like artificially creating, you know, all these different things and through the magic of surgery and all that, I mean, which is very temporary.
That and it's very opportunistic for the medical community to be using people's hurt and their pain and their childhood traumas and whatever else there is, that it's almost like a conversion therapy for gay, very feminine gay men to feel that they have to do things to themselves to present in society instead of just being themselves.
Absolutely. Nobody should feel they have to do things. You know, no, absolutely, that's wrong, you know. Like I said, it's your own body. Nobody else has the right to say to you, you have to do this, you know, or you have to do that. If you want to do it, if you feel it's your path, that's fine. You shouldn't be obstructed, but people should not be being coerced. Just interestingly, to bring up a point you touched on there, which is quite amusing. There was a people called the Phrygians. They lived in what is now Turkey, and they were written about by the Greeks, Herodotus particularly, but also Roman writers. And the transmen were very common in that culture because they worshipped a deity called Cybele, who's a goddess. And one of the things that the young males would do was to drink distilled pregnant mare urine, right, which is absolutely full of estrogen, and it's what they used to make Premarin now. So they were doing this 2,500 years ago.
Wow. We're
it's absolutely amazing.
About that.
Yeah, we did read about that. Actually, urine therapy is very good. We actually practice urine therapy. It keeps you young. It has stem cells. It's very sterile, so it's not going to harm you. And it's like the fountain of youth, and it helps heal. It keeps cancer away. So we're hormone free. So we've been since July. So we've been doing urine therapy. We are plant-based diet eaters, and we exercise and take care of ourselves. I mean, I've damaged my body enough in the 15 years that I put testosterone in it. And I see trans men falling sick day in, day out. I see trans women falling sick day in, day out. Hormones are very lethal. Synthetic hormones do not belong in your bodies. So, you know, very much so into that urine therapy and letting your body do its natural thing.
Of course,
well, I say that the most successful trans women I know they're actually taking very low doses of hormones because they are naturally feminine. You know, they don't really need it, and it's just like they say. They always say, but it does
because you know, if you look at the non-HSTS or the late transitioners, when they take hormones, it really does nothing for them, you know, and it does a lot of harm. And that's what, you know, they don't realize that. It's like you are playing Russian roulette. Every time I would just take a shot every week, I would cringe. I'm like, is this the shot that's going to end up giving me a heart attack, a stroke, or cancer?
I don't know, you've probably come across this, but Dr. Anne Lawrence, she has a regimen for trans women of what the hormones they should take. And it's mind-boggling. It's huge doses of estrogen, blockers, you name it.
She's a trans.
They're supposed to be scoffing every day. It cannot be doing anybody good. That cannot be good.
It's killing them. It's killing them. And you know, there's going to come a time where there's going to be lawsuits left, right, and center.
You're absolutely right. You know, the only people who are more venal in society than doctors is lawyers.
Oh yes.
And once the lawyers realize they can make a lot out of this, it's going to be an absolute mess.
Oh yeah,
to put it really
and it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And when it happens, this whole transgender thing is going to go boop, because then no doctor is going to want to touch anybody. It's like no, 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 and it's going to happen.
No, because it's the proof. Sorry, go on. I was just going to say all you need to do is. Sorry, you go. There's a delay on this device. You go.
Oh, I was just going to say that there are so many trans women out there that I remember that they wanted their elevated numbers to be like 800 to 1,000. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, pregnancy levels for biological women, and they wanted to stay at that level all the time. And what I found out was that the more they took, the more masculine they started looking, and they still kind of like got lost in that, you know, feeling, that delusion that they were actually doing something to feminize themselves when it was doing the absolute ricochet of that.
I agree with you completely. I made a comment in the Warm Pink Jelly Express train, actually. It was about something else, but it's relevant in that I said that the girl had done something. I can't remember what it was now, but and I said she just went that little bit further. And I said it's like a mechanic giving a nut an extra half turn just to make sure it's tight, which is a really guy thing to do. Yes, we all do it. But that's what they're doing. They're going, oh, obviously I didn't do enough. I'll do some more. You know, I'll take some more. Until they're consuming these really large quantities, which cannot be. And as you say, what happens is that a lot of it gets reprocessed and it turns into testosterone. So it's actually negative.
Exactly.
It's negative.
Yeah, there are those groups on Facebook that actually have, you know, discussions about, you know, these trans women have on these groups, and they think that they're professionals, and they're prescribing all these crazy amounts of estrogen and how to induce lactation and how to, I mean, all these crazy things. And it's like, you people are just like scientists.
Mad scientists.
Like obsessed scientists. You know.
I think you're right.
They're going to hurt themselves.
What's going to happen? This is what's going to happen. Somebody will produce a case where they can show that due care was not followed by a professional. And when that happens, and there's a judgment against, the floodgates will open. The floodgates will open.
I'm predicting that. I've been predicting that.
It's going to be now, so it's going to be such a mess. And the sad thing is really that all the genuine trans women who are just lovely women who want to get on with life, they're going to be hit. You know, because there's all these people who are crazy doing things they shouldn't be
doing. Yeah. I mean, I'm a believer that there is no need for anybody to harm themselves or to claim a gender that they weren't born as. I think that as a responsible species, we need to learn to accept our realities and learn to deal with our lives and not run away from it.
And just to realize that we are different types of humans, you know, I mean, Mark, you know, Maritza, Paul, Lena, you know, I mean, we're just like this combination. It's like, you know, at the buffet, we talk about it. There's chocolate, there's vanilla, and then there's swirl, you know, and we're just swirl, you know, we're just that type of human. And, you know, to be able to appreciate the beauty of both genders in one person is just,
it's wonderful,
amazing, you know, and that's what we give each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, well, for me, you know, I've occasionally dated when I've not been with someone. I mean, because I like to date, you know, dates for me very rarely end up in bed. You know, it's not that kind of thing. I mean, let's go out for dinner, you know. And I do date women if I'm not actually in a relationship with someone. But in terms of relationships, I find that I gravitate towards trans women very much now.
And it's like your preference and what you enjoy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you know,
it just works. It just works nicely, you know. And I don't. I have 4 kids. I don't want any more kids. I promised my daughter she was the last one, so I can't break that, you know.
I hear you.
But
that duality that you might like.
Yeah,
you know,
and seeing that you like to date and be with trans women, that most likely you're looking for that duality, because even though they're feminine, and a lot of the HSTS are feminine, but they also have a little bit of guy in them.
oh yeah,
Male, and that is what's attractive. That androgyny, I know that's what attracts me. I mean, I don't like a woman that's all like excessively feminine and
you're a lesbian for
and I was a
38
lesbian.
years.
I can't count fingers and toes how many women I've been to bed with, how many women I've been with. I was not promiscuous. Okay, I was like, I did off the chain. And I never liked that excessive, like what they call the lipstick lesbian, or that excessive feminine woman. I liked the woman that had a little bit of that androgen in them, you know, a little bit of masculine, a little bit of feminine. It was like, yeah, and that's who I've always been till I messed myself up with all these hormones. I could like one day end up being very feminine, one day being very masculine, or some days I could combine them, and I miss that.
It's almost like a godlike type of quality, you know. It's like a little bit of that yin,
a little bit of that yang, you know?
And yeah. So
I think to an extent, you know, the whole, it's partly to do with identity politics, the idea that you have to adopt a specific identity, you know, and then once you've adopted that identity, there's the path. It's kind of marked out, you know, you must go down this path and no deviation allowed, and you're never allowed to backtrack or anything like that. I think that's very prescriptive, and I don't think it's healthy.
It's not, and it's what's created this crazy trans train.
And that's what WPATH is all stands behind. I mean, when we were detransitioning at one point, it was like there was nothing out there for helping people that were, you know, going to go back to living in their original gender. I mean, there was nothing like that.
It's hard to change your paperwork back. It's crazy. They should never, ever give people a change of an F or an M. They should say you're a, what is it they call it, dual gender or something, so that, you know, you're different. And you know, you've got this different, and then that's okay. You know, because I'll never be a man. You'll never be a woman. And it's okay. You know, we are
you. As long as you're you and you're happy, it doesn't really matter. And certainly on this gender marker thing, is I have to say, well, how often is it really necessary to have any kind of gender marker? And how does it help a law enforcement officer to be looking at what appears to be a woman and she's got M on her driving license? I mean, it's crazy. That's nuts. It doesn't help. Eye color, something like that would be a lot more useful.
Or a non-binary, you know, and for non-binary or whatever, so that depending on what you're in the mood that day, or you don't feel like getting all fussed up, and you know, cop sees and one non-binary person here. Yeah. Okay, on your way.
I think it helps, and I think, to be honest with you, that because I've worked with policemen a lot in my life as a journalist, you know, and you talk to them a lot, I think most policemen would feel the same. Like, it's a complete waste of time. It's not like we check. you don't go and have a look. You know, it's just a total waste of time.
You got below there.
Who on earth would do that? The only argument I've ever heard that was mildly plausible was in the cases of accidents. You know, people have been so badly injured that you can't really tell what you're looking at.
Man.
And now, you know, male and female, but that's very rare. It's really, really rare, that sort of thing. In most cases, I just think it's a waste of time.
Really pushes, you know, they push on this gender marker change, and I mean, we've known people that still look like guys, but they have their stuff, you know, an orchiectomy or something, and they get the little paper and they wave that around so proudly, like they just got some sort of diploma from school. Like, look, now I've got this, you know, and it's like, it's so childlike. It's so like, and then it creates problems when you no longer believe the lie that you just want to be. It creates problems because now they don't want to change the stuff back. Or it takes like your
firstborn. We went to the Social Security office here in the United States in Florida and have our papers changed back, and they're like, "I'm sorry, that document only works one time."
You have to go back to court, and you have to go to the doctor and have the doctor say that you're this, and you're like, it's already, it's like traumatic enough, you know. And you went, it's like, it's not.
You can't change the markers back. That's very strange.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point. I'm often, my friends in the Philippines often say that they really wish they were in the West, because in the West you can change your gender markers. And I keep telling them, look, this is no big deal. Actually, trans people in the Philippines are pretty cool. You can be, there's no homophobia. You know, it's cool. It's just not a problem. Occasionally somebody will get misgendered, but it's very rare. It's very, very rare. Most of the time, it's like, yeah, it's not a problem. It's just not a problem. And the social tolerance is very high. So they have actually quite comfortable lives. The only real problem that trans women have, I mean, they have discrimination, but the main problem is that historically it was quite difficult for them to get jobs where they had to deal with the public, you know, because the employers is like, oh, don't know about that, you know. And even that's changing. To be honest with you, even that's changing. You know, in Thailand, you go into any bank and there will be at least one trans woman working there. All over the place. They're there, you know. That's happening it's becoming more the case in the Philippines. So they have a very, you know, it's just not uncomfortable for them. It's easy. And
it's the culture.
It's the culture.
Well,
It's the culture.
yeah, I was going to ask you before we ask this other question. The people that take part in those pageants and stuff, you were saying that most HSTSs don't even compete. It's all autogynified.
Yeah, they're too short. They're 5'1". Like my girlfriend's 5'1", you know. And the girls you're talking about are like my ex-girlfriend who was 5'11". Now you take a 5'11" girl and you put her in a set of high heels, you know, she got silicone boobs, and they are often, because they're Asian, you know, Asians are often very, you know, feminine. Well, I call it feminine. I mean, well, they might be offended, but they're not masculine in their faces. You take somebody like that and you put a dose of theatre makeup on and, you know, put on the robes and stuff like that, and my goodness, you know, they do turn your head, and you've got this tiny little HST in the middle going, hey up there. So it's difficult for them. You know, it is really difficult.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that carries over into the United States with the present, like, say, like the Victoria's Secret models and things like that? I mean, do you think that they're actually, some of them?
Yeah, I mean, Gina Roquero is obviously, you know, she's obviously trans and she's autogynephilic, and she came up through that whole thing. You know, autogynephilic trans women, particularly, are really attracted to each other. Now, it might not be an actual sexual thing, but it's sexualized. You know, it's this idea of this community of trans women all together, and they really like it. They feel really comfortable at home, because they can be as over the top in their femininity as they want. You know, it's not a problem. You're doing cabaret, for goodness sake. You know, it can be, and the audience love it. They just absolutely adore it. So they cluster there. You find them, they cluster there. If they're good looking, they'll try and work in that. A lot of them work in cabaret in Japan, for example. Now, let's be quite honest. They're not just doing cabaret. You know, they're also selling it. You know, because that's where they make the real money. What?
Repeat what you said, because you kind of broke out.
You know, a lot of these girls work, particularly the tall autogynephilic ones, they work in Japan, in cabaret. But the cabaret is not where they make the money. You know, they're making the money by sex work, basically. Yeah. And they make a lot of money. And I mean a lot of money.
Well, that's how a lot of trans women here in the West as well. I mean, you know, they end up all wanting to be either model, actresses, or some form of entertainment, which is going to give them the attention. And then a lot of them also, you know,
they sell money. That gives them the money.
Yeah, and that's where they have expensive taste, you know. But with that comes a price, because with that comes AIDS, venereal diseases. A lot of them get killed, and their self-worth as they get older, they commit suicide because they can't even. There's more suicide post-transition, I mean, here in the West, the trans cultists try to push the concept that people commit suicide if they don't transition, which is actually the opposite. Once people transition, the suicide rates are higher.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I'm sure you're right. And that's certainly something that's being suppressed. That's information that's definitely they don't want it out there. It's because it's become a cult, and it's become this politically motivated cult. It's not a good idea. There's the two bad things, you know, like a quasi-religion and a political movement in the same, all wrapped up together. This is not good. It's not good.
It's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. And people don't even have a clue, because the world as we know it is being changed because of this cult, and it's not good. It's really not good.
And I think the thing is that it's, yeah, go on. Were you about to ask a question?
Yeah.
What is your take on gender dysphoria? Do you see it as a real thing, or do you see it more as a byproduct of childhood traumas or the need to fit into society?
I think it takes different forms in different people, and depending on whether you're talking about HSTS and autogynephilics. Autogynephilics frequently have a real detestation of the masculine parts of their bodies, you know, their genitalia particularly. And it's a really visceral hatred, you know, especially in the West. That's much less the case for HSTS. Their dysphoria is a social one. You know, like I said earlier, they don't want to be put in a position where it could be revealed that they're actually not what they say they are. So that makes them very nervous. And that's after transition, of course. HSTS just, they have real difficulty surviving as men. You know, it's not easy for them. Like I said, you know, and then she's by no means the only one I know like that. My girlfriend's 5'1", incredibly. You couldn't imagine how she could possibly function as a guy. You know, it's like, how could you be a guy? Because she's so feminine. And it's not hormones that's done that. She just is like that. And I know quite a few people like that. And for them, it's not really a sense of discomfort. It's a sense of, it's just going to be a damn sight easier. And I'm going to be a lot more plausible, believable, you know, as a girl. And that's what they do, you know. AGPs, I think particularly in the West, there's a real, this idea that they really hate the masculine side. It's like almost like they resent it. And I can't wait to get rid of it.
Hold that thought for a second. Why do you think that is? Because, you know, as a society, we tend to not really look at the big picture. We have these men that are hating their masculine side, and in my opinion is because they didn't have a good father figure, or the father was absent, or they might have been sexually molested, touched the wrong way when they were younger, so they've grown to detest, or they were made fun of because they weren't your average guy. Well, how does that statement resonate?
I think that there's, well, again, I think you have to look at the fact that there's two different types going on here. It's certainly the case that HSTS will often have been bullied, called sissies. They may well have had unwanted interference and touching from adults, you know. Perhaps the adults had realized that they were different. That definitely does happen. AGP, usually they're quite conventional boys, you know. Like look at the Caitlyn Jenner, you know, a very classic guy. And you know that you at the moment, I saw a report the other day saying that there's an elevated number of trans women in the military, in the forces. Well, of course, because they go there because it's a masculine thing to do. And what they're doing is they're kind of hyper-masculinizing. You know, it's going like, let's be as gay as I possibly can, because it fights off the autogynephilia. But that doesn't work. You can't do that. If you're going to, I get letters from people, emails, you know, men particularly, who are fighting autogynephilia. They go to a gender clinic, and the gender clinic says, well, okay, well, we'll just get you on hormones and you're going to transition, you'll get your surgery, blah, blah, blah. And they go, I don't want to do that. I'm a guy. And it's very difficult for them. And I think that they're kind of trapped between hyper-masculinizing, you know, let's just really fight it, be as masculine as I possibly can, And this idea, well, yeah, you're just going to have to transition. For those people, I personally think that psychoanalysis, and really trying to find out inside their own heads and see inside their own minds what's going on, is probably the way forward. And I always believe, by the way, that the minimum treatment that produces the desired result is what you should do, not the maximum. It should never go over. It should always be the smallest amount.
And I think the psychotherapists aren't working on the real issues, because again, you've got this man who's lived as a man all their life, and all of a sudden, and when you say they try to like create these hypermasculine things, I don't think that or a very feminine person could ever even try to be. LGBTs, I think, are claiming that I became a kung fu artist because I was trying to hide my feminine side.
And they were massive, like, male chauvinist before.
So
that's kind of like my opinion.
What's I've forgotten her name, the MMA fighter, Fallon Fox.
Oh boy.
I mean, she has two pulp. This can't be right. It just can't be right. It's just not right. And nobody can really stand up and say that this is acceptable, because it just ain't.
It's not. And shame on the social justice warrior and people that are like promoting this as being okay. How can a man be put in a ring with a woman just because all of a sudden now they're taking hormones, which doesn't make them into a woman, and they're
bone structure,
and they're beating the crap out of these women? It's just like, what is wrong with society? Have we all lost our minds?
Well, to an extent, yeah. I mean, remember, that particular individual is not just any guy. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's a trained killer.
I know.
Trained, barehanded killer. It's outrageous. That is really outrageous. But if I say that, I can really get it in the neck. One of the things that's interesting.
I'm used to getting it in the neck.
We're used to that.
And one thing that I'm tired of being PC, and the truth needs to get out there, because people are generally being hurt. People are being hurt and lied to.
And particularly very young.
Yeah, exactly. And older people, people that are in their middle-age crisis or in their 30s, that all of a sudden are getting these false hopes that, hey, you could be anything you want to be. No, you can't. There are responsible things that people have in life, and these gender specialists all need to have their licenses removed, and they need to be held accountable for what they're doing. And these doctors need to be held accountable for what they're doing, because they're messing people's lives.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know what kind of qualifications most of these specialists, so-called, actually have. Engaged in conversation, are clueless. They frankly are clueless.
Yeah.
And you even mention something like Ray Blanchard, and they go, "Oh, that's highly controversial." Absolute nonsense. It's just nonsense. It's mainstream science.
Yeah.
And yet they don't know what they're talking about, and they're prescribing for people. Exactly. They're giving out letters. Here you are. Go and take my letter and go and get yourself in the queue for GRS. This is not good. It's just not good. The
blind are leading the blind, and it's very dangerous.
One of the things that I was just to finish what I was going to say earlier. I get these messages from men who are struggling, and autogynephilia is quite interesting, because they've got this. If they're not out, if they're still look like guys, but they're fighting it, quite a lot of them have like a talisman that will keep it at bay. And the very common one is to wear women's underwear. You've got a guy wearing a three-piece suit, he's at work, quite happy, and underneath it he's got a pair of frilly panties on. But that actually works. That's enough to keep it at bay. And there certainly are people who've done this I know, because I've had emails from them, who've done this all their lives. They don't, and they never go any further, because that's it. That's enough. That's the wee, like the talisman, the special charm that keeps it. That's okay. That keeps everything together. It's on, and it's all fine. And that's so simple. And I would have thought that for a lot of these males in that situation, with a little bit of, some serious, but probably not that long-term psychoanalyst to figure out exactly what was their particular talisman, and they could probably just control it like that.
Exactly, without harming anyone, without leaving their families, without putting dangerous hormones in their body and getting these stupid surgeries. Everybody has a male and a female side in them. And there's, I don't know if you've heard of Carl Jung, but there's an animus and an animus in every one of us. And there's time in our lives where we need to express, if you're a guy, we need to express that female part of you to help fully develop your psyche, your spirit. And the same goes for women. And that's all this is. It's like people are not being allowed to express themselves, and they're being bottled up. They're being suppressed. And then what happens when you suppress something so long? It blows up.
Absolutely. You can't. Repression is a terrible thing. It really is. It causes so much trouble. I mean, I think in a way that I've always been quite lucky because I'm an artist, so I'm a photographer, a musician, and I've always had a release. I've always had that creative side in my life. That's fine. That's really all I need. But I suppose that if you didn't have that kind of release, then maybe some of these other things might become, the idea of contacting your feminine or your creative side might take another form, and maybe not a healthy form. It's possible. So
exactly.
One of the things I always tell people is my daughter, who's very feminine and very lovely, she's a blacksmith. Bang in the hot metal, bang, bang, bang. She's been doing it since she was 12 years old, and she's actually got a reputation now as a fine art blacksmith. She makes blades and knives and things like that. And everybody goes, what? Because if they know her particularly, because she's extremely feminine and pretty, just because you do things that are, not particularly conventional for your sex, doesn't mean you're trans. It just doesn't, And I think that we're getting far too much of this, oh, you like to do that, you must be trans. That's just crazy. It's a nonsense.
And now these clinics are coming out. If anybody tries to stop it, they literally report the parents. They do things behind the parents' back and actually start the hormone treatment on 15-year-olds. I mean, it's just bizarre. It's some sort of cult that is definitely taking over our society.
Well, the thing also is that with autogynephiles, the motivation and stuff, when it goes off the tracks, when they get into that SRS region of their lives or the orky, things start backfiring on them, because now the dopamine high, they're not sexual anymore, they're neutered male. So now they don't have the responses that they thought that they were going to have. Oh, I have my goal.
The thing is, you guys obviously will have experienced this more than me, but there's a degree of confirmation bias. I mean, if you've gone down a long path of taking hormones and having surgeries, it gets harder to say, I just wasted all my time.
Exactly.
All this,
and that's what happened.
That's very, very difficult. Because I think people stop being honest with themselves. And that's one of the things I find interesting about the Philippines is that they go, 35. I can't cut the mustard anymore else. Which in a way is sad, but at the same time, like I said, they've had their glory days. They've had that time in their lives when they could be beautiful and and be stars. They are, they are like that. They are stars in their own way. And then they just retire, and that's it. That's why you don't see. They hang their hat.
What else to do?
Yeah, another Becky.
And things like that. They'll have a collection of trophies and photographs and all that, which they'll have at home. Oh, this is when I was, a beauty queen. This overweight.
One more question.
Go on.
One more question. I know it's getting late for you. Regarding, I know your main focus has always been on HSTS and AGP. Do you think that trans men, though, have some sort of autoandrophiliac or something like that? And I'll give you my take first before I get yours. I think that, and I went through this phase. I transitioned when I was 38 years old. good looking Latin, you know, got all the muscles, and I look at myself in the mirror. You know, my heydays are gone. But
no, they're not.
You know, I was like, oh, mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the greatest on the wall? I'd sit there in my underwear shots, do my little muscle thing. You know, it's all about me. And I see a lot of trans guys doing this too. But no one really talks about this love of self type of thing with trans guys. What do you think about that?
I think that's very, very interesting, because Blanchard himself says he doesn't think that it's actually autoandrophilia. It's the inverse of autogynephilia. He says, "Oh, I don't think it exists." I'm not convinced. I think that there is certainly. That's interesting what you've said, because that's very like what you see with autogynephilic trans women. I also think there's a significant amount of social autoandrophilia. There's an idea of you want to play the role that men play in society, you know, and you want to mix like men, not like women, which I think is interesting. But I think that if autoandrophilia is there, because the autogynephilia is powered by the male sex drive, okay? At the end of the day, it's his attraction to himself as a woman.
But we take testosterone, which creates that same sex drive.
Same artificial.
The only thing that I miss about being on T is the sex drive that I had. Because now that I'm off T, it's like,
it's harder.
It's harder. But,
but the thing is that male sexuality is very different from female sexuality. So if autoandrophilia exists, I wouldn't expect it to be the mirror of autogynephilia. I would expect it to be a subtly different and have different forms. I wouldn't expect to see just like, oh, it's the exact opposite from, you know, you see what I mean? So I would expect it to have different emphases and to express itself in different ways, which might be what we're talking about. It's more social. It's more.
With me, it was a bit social because, okay, let me explain this. Since I was identified lesbian for so many years, and I was always shamed by my parents, shamed by my family, shamed by society. So when I was bodybuilding, I started bodybuilding, I started building muscle, and I think that kind of twigged something in my head, which, you know, somebody asked me, hey, are you an FTM? Because I was already masculinized, and I looked into it, and I was like, you mean I could be a man and I don't have to be ridiculed anymore? And then when I started taking testosterone, I transitioned, and I started falling in love with the image that I was creating. There wasn't enough mirrors that I could look at. Every time it was like, wow. It was like I was starting to fall in love with this man that I created. A man that if I would have met a man as my female self, I would have fallen in love with it. And I was so into that, and I was so into the power and very controlling nature. I was married to a genetic female for 11 years, and I was the papi, and I was a man's man. Yeah. You know, I don't think that.
Maury Povich in
I had this interview with Maury Povich, and he was like in awe. And I have this very strong personality. So now it grew. I just became this like lioness, He-Man. I don't feel that way anymore. It's all, I mean, I could bring it up at will, but now it's like I'm just this, you know, I like who I've become now. I have this beautiful combination of this woman, even though I don't look it, but I've learned to appreciate the woman in me by having become a so-called man, which I was never a man, but it's what, you know, I thought at the time years ago. And so now it's just this beautiful essence of this person, and it's like, wow, this is what it's all about. That uber masculine, that excessive look in the mirror. Now I don't barely care what I, you know, look like.
I think
I look great, but
yeah, you do. But I think there's also a thing about youth, you know, which was a long time ago for me. But I think we're all, when we're young, we're all a bit vain, you know. I mean, I'm still hellish vain, you know. I can't help it. But I think there's always that idea, you know, that when you're young, you know, and you're going out for the night, you know, and it's like, you know, I look good tonight, you know. Don't you think I look good? You can't help it, and it kind of, I think it's kind of like that, but more intense. You know, it just gets really strong amongst trans people and trans women mainly, I know, and yeah, they can't walk past the mirror. They can't even walk past a shop front that's got a reflection in it. Just walking down the road, looking at themselves all the time.
Yeah.
I notice you don't do it. It's very nice, but, you know, constantly with the comb, you know.
Yeah, or trans women with a hair.
Flipping
Or
hair.
in like every chance they get, picture,
Selfie,
selfie.
Absolutely crazy.
But there's
stuff.
a real difference in, you know, men who transition lose their place in society, whereas women who transition gain a place in society. And that is a huge difference because they get social capital,
Absolutely.
whereas trans women lose everything. You know, they lose, you know, their status, their man card is gone, never to come back. And
You're absolutely right. And I think that is evident now in the large numbers of young trans men that we're seeing coming and, you know, transitioning in their teens, and they're reaching that stage of life when it is difficult for women because their body's changing, you know, and they feel. I think they're somewhat conditioned that they can't succeed in a man's world. They're also aware that that men look at them, and it becomes very difficult for them to do this. And here's a very easy thing to do: we'll give you the testosterone, and you can put all that behind you. You can be a guy, you'll gain male status, and guys won't look at you, and you can move forward in your life. And that, to me, is a very dangerous thing to do, because I think it damages. I think it really damages young women. And I think that they're at a stage in their life where they're vulnerable. You know, at a stage in life, I know that young people don't like it when old farts like me say, sometimes the older people do know better, but actually sometimes we do. You know?
You do. You do.
Just like a 14 or a 15-year-old say, right, this is what I'm going to do. It's like, I'm not persuaded.
Yeah, it's wrong. And they don't realize that as we age, life gets more complicated.
Yeah.
I often wonder if, God forbid, as I get older, I get sick and I have to land in a nursing home, what kind of treatment am I going to get? When, you know, a nurse practitioner or somebody comes in to change my bedding or to change me, and they go, what in the world is that? You know, it's like, when we're young, we don't think of the ramification of what this life or lifestyle is. I think it's a lifestyle. Many people think that they don't have a choice. You do have a choice. When you choose this rabbit hole to go down this deep end, you are messing with your life. Not only your life, the life of others. Generations to come. And you don't think about getting old, that it's no longer going to be fun and games. You really have to deal with people, with things.
Anybody that I grew up with, I'm sure it's the same now. Nobody in their teens even thinks they'll live past 30. You know, never mind. Certainly men, you know, guys are like that. It's like, you know, motorbikes, all the stuff that you do. And it's like, no, you haven't got a chance. And, you know, you end up 60 and you go, wait a minute, I'm still here. And you have to face the consequences of all the stupid things you've done, you know, in your life, which includes, unfortunately, these things.
And, you know, it's a really false sense of transformation, because what ends up happening is that, especially with trans men, is that they change so quickly, so massively. Their voice changes, their hair grows on their face and their body, and they assume, and it's almost like they grew too fast before their brain was able to catch up with it. And it's really sad because they look like men, but they're still women. You know, they're still women. And testosterone's powerful. It's a powerful hormone.
It's a hugely powerful thing. It's immensely powerful. And I honestly don't think that, I don't know about you, but I think that a lot of young women who start on it, I think they're really shocked. And I think it's a buzz. I think there's that hit, you know, it's like, wow. You know, and that it's probably quite addictive, but it is immensely powerful. It's immensely powerful. I mean, I've never taken anything like that. You know, I've never even took like steroids, for goodness sake. But I can imagine that something as strong as testosterone is, and every man is aware of it, it must be quite, you know, because you're going to be on edge all the time. You're going to have that spike, like you said about the sexuality. You're going to have all these things.
I mean, there were times where I would masturbate 4 and 5 times a day when I first started, and it was just like, and you have this sense of power, and you have all this you know, you can lift things that you never lifted before. And all of a sudden, it's like the person that was bullied, all of a sudden it's like, come on, bully me now, you know. And and it's dangerous because it messes with your mind, it messes with your heart, it messes with everything. It removes your essence. And that's why I'm so glad that I'm not on it anymore, that I'm able to feel again, that I'm able to get in contact with the woman that I am. And you know, I've made peace with the fact that I've destroyed my beauty and I've destroyed many things in me, and it takes a lot of hard work to make peace.
Everybody's beautiful. But, you know, your body is a map of your life. It's a map of the journey that you've made in life, and everybody's different. Everybody's is different. You know, it's just life. You know, you can't help it. You can't change the fact that we make decisions, and we make them for, hopefully, we make them for what seem like good reasons at the time. Right. My concern has never been with people making decisions. That's fine. You know, that's great. I don't have a problem with it. My concern at the moment is with professional advisors who are not helping. We're pushing people down paths that, no, they shouldn't be doing this. The West is not.
They have no clue what.
This is not the same culture as the ones that you find in Southeast Asia or even South America, which have systems in place. Which, I mean, they're hard places to live because there's no social security. There's nothing like that. But at the same time, the individuals concerned, the people who trans, they're fine. You know, I mean, I know people who identify as trans men. One woman in particular, I mean, she's what, 55, I think now, and nobody puts her down. You know, it's fine. It's all okay. You know, and I do know older trans women who didn't desist. I mean, most of them do, but some continue. Some HSTS are actually so attractive that they just keep going. You know, it's not a problem for them to keep going. Others just don't care. You know, just don't care. But so there's a complete range of possibilities, and your choices are not being closed off, which I do think they are in the West. I think that once you go down a particular line, that's it. You're expected to stick with it. And society is like, no, we let you change once, but we can't let you change again, which is crazy.
You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. People's lives, you know, people's lives are at stake here, and it's wrong. You know that they allow you to go one way, but then they don't allow you to go the other, and it's
it's crazy to let people go one way and then not come back. You know, it's fine. You're allowed to make mistakes in life. You are.
Yeah.
Strong belief.
These really young women in their 20s, they see themselves looking like studs and everything, but you know, they don't realize that in about 10 years, their hair is going to be gone. They're aging massively in ways that a regular man
would not.
They end up looking like the Travelocity gnome by the time they're 50. You know, I mean, it's really sad because, you know, where does it end? It doesn't seem to end well in the Western side of the world with trans people, because they end up sick and very old and diseased and damaged and mentally, you know,
mentally worse off than how they started.
Oh, I agree with that.
Because once you destroy your endocrine system, and that's what hormones do, they destroy the person's endocrine system, and then the mind goes off. The mind just doesn't function right anymore because it's all connected.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And of course, within autogynephilia, particularly, they're living in a fantasy world anyway. You know, because particularly somebody who transitions in middle ages. I mean, even young ones, but transition in middle age. I mean, they're looking at a mirror. They know they're looking at a guy. So, you know, you have to switch off all those natural checks that we've all got in our heads. And it means that in the end of the day, reality doesn't actually mean anything to them. You know, that everything is unreal. What they are is unreal, so everything else is unreal. And I think that's a problem, because I think that I think Caitlyn Jenner, I think she's totally lost touch with reality.
Gone.
MK Ultra.
MK Ultra. We believe in MK Ultra, that somebody took that macho, good-looking, strong person and figure how can we mess with
men?
How can we get men, and how can we mess up people's lives? Yeah, we'll take this uber masculine guy and have him think he's a woman.
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, whoa.
If he can do it,
I could do it. You know, it's like.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's been far too much of that. Yeah.
Well,
he was known about since the 1980s. There had been newspaper reports that he enjoyed cross-dressing, and the thing is that he was happy like that. It was like his talisman, you know.
Yeah.
Nobody minds, you know. It's like, you know, it's just daddy's lunacy.
We all got kinks, so you know it's no big deal. But when you take that kink and you take it to the next level, there's problems.
You got a problem. Yeah. I mean, he's lucky because he's immensely rich, but most of the men to whom this happens are not, and many of them lose absolutely everything. I mean, they really do.
They do.
They lose family, they lose profession, they lose all their money, everything.
And they lose their heart and they lose their soul. I've got several friends, and real quick, as I know it's late. One was a gorgeous model guy, famous, worked for all the famous models.
Over Europe.
All over Europe. All of a sudden, they began to transition. They did everything because they had the money. They contacted me and told me, I did an interview with them on the show. Please take the show off. I'm detransitioning. I'm coming off hormones. I'm like detransitioning. I've lost my soul. And they were beautiful. I lost my soul. I don't want any part of this anymore. Another person that I've known, they were like dying to get their SRS. They're 60 or something years old. And recently I checked up on them, and it's like they're suicidal. They're in pain. They hate life. They're in a dark place. And they said before, I'm in a dark place. I need to have SRS. Well, they had SRS, and now they're worse off.
Yeah, they're worse off. Yeah.
I
don't think I think that having SRS, GRS, because you are in a bad place, is the worst idea you could possibly have. I think that's an unbelievably stupid thing to do. And again, looking at the Philippines, Southeast Asian example, very few of them have GRS. Very, very few. And most of them because they don't take heavy doses of hormones. I know ex-trans women who are now fathers. And they're fine. You know? They're fine. It's fine.
The message here is to, you know, have people love themselves, because that's, I think, one of the biggest problems we have in society is lack of self-love, lack of unconditional love. They love themselves if they have this, and the other, and if I look this way, and if I look that way. And if you don't love yourself for who you are and just be happy, then nothing that you have to do.
Never forget that you can turn around. It is allowed. You know, you can change your mind. That's okay. Changing mind is okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Rod, my own personal experience is that I lost everything. I transitioned back when I was 43, and I lost everything. I had a marriage, 17 years, 5 children. I sacrificed everything at the altar of becoming a woman, and that was, you know, to my destruction. You know, I almost lost my life. I almost ended up, you know, just losing everything with regards to me. And then I met Mark, you know, and it ended up okay for me because, I mean, I'm alive and I'm, you know, I'm with the love of my life here.
You both seem happy.
I'm great for that, you know, but sadly, a lot of middle-aged transitioners, they do not end up well at all.
They don't.
You know,
they don't.
And
I think I honestly think that encouraging people in that position to transition is a very bad idea. And I think that if there's anything at all they could do that could keep it off, you know, and like I say, even if it's like, well, okay, wear a set of pantyhose under your suit, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. If that keeps it at bay, it's fine. It's going to be a better solution, I think, than taking really radical steps that you can't easily reverse. Right. And losing, as you did, losing everything that is important to you.
Yeah, not just losing everything, it's like losing your legacy, losing your just everything, your essence of who you were, what you meant, your place. It's like one of those, you know, Asian men who is highly respected as they get older, and then all of a sudden they do something that loses all of their,
and all based on a lie.
Based on a
lie, because, you know, vulnerable people, you're told something, you go, I could be that.
I mean, I could do that. I went to 2 gender therapists, and I told them about my story. I had the same stereotypical, I knew when I was 5, wanted to be a girl, blah, 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 and, you know, all that stuff. And then they're like, oh, honey, why didn't you start sooner? We're going to get you on hormones as soon as you're ready. And I'm like, you're not going to talk to my wife? You're not going to talk about what is going to happen to my family?
Mm-hmm.
You don't care.
They don't
you know?
care.
And
they don't.
That certainly was. Earlier this year, I phoned around most of the, well, several at least of the ones that would answer me, charities active in this area in the United Kingdom. And they absolutely were not interested in anything other than transition. It was like, that's it. That's all.
Tunnel vision.
Oh yeah, because I was asking the question, what do you do with men who have autogynephilia, you know, but they don't want to transition, and they just go, oh, they just have to transition.
It's crazy.
They don't have any choice.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like
really
forced sterilization, eugenics. It's almost like we're an experiment. You know, they're experimenting with a group of people.
The road to transhumanism.
Yeah, and then, the road to transhumanism. And then they're trying to get rid of the population. So what better way to have us self-destruct?
It is crazy. And I think that, as you say, you know, there's the problem is that there's the vested interest and money, a lot of money involved here. And that is causing a lot of problems.
Definitely.
I don't think it's good. You don't see that in Asia. It's not. Nobody's paying for their, you know, it's just, that's not a market in the way that it has become in the West. And I don't think this is something that really is, I don't think it operates very well in a market situation. I don't think it's a good idea. You can't, oh, I'll sell you a new gender. That's crazy. That's just crazy.
The whole concept of being able to switch sex is something like the Twilight Zone. And now that I'm years into it and I understand it, before I was blind, and that's what happens. They take blind people and they lead them astray. But if you really remove the veil and you open your eyes and you really think of the concept, you're like, damn, was I crazy? What was I thinking about? You know?
You can't do it. I mean, my girlfriend is a highly feminized male, right? And everybody knows this. She knows this. I know this. He's not a problem.
Not a problem at all.
She's comfy like that.
Beautiful thing.
It's fine for her, you know. And she's a happy person, a very happy person. So for me, that's what we should be looking at. And when people start with this, and particularly the case with, unfortunately, with the late transitioning autoidentifiers, I am a real woman. I must be seen as a real woman. It's crazy.
It is.
It just isn't. You know, and
tie them up, put them in the room, or with the straight jacket, and
there's this sense that I remember when I was transitioning early, that there's this sense of competition between Western trans women. They want to they get jealous of each other super easy. They compare pictures all the time. They look at their selfies and then they imagine themselves, oh, I'm not looking like that, you know. That's not even probably even common in Southeast Asia, is it? It's probably
It is. They're constantly doing all that stuff, and they're very competitive. Yeah. That's why the pageants are so successful, because it's let's really compete, and they go to immense lengths, really immense lengths to do.
Crazy stuff. Anyway, I know it's late, and it's what, 4:14 in the morning where you're at, and it's been a wonderful,
well, it's been a really wonderful chat. I've really enjoyed meeting both of you. A very pleasant evening. Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Please keep in touch.
We watch your videos all the time. We love what you have to say,
We
and,
do.
and that's why we wanted to bring you on the show.
At the moment, I'm preparing to leave because I fly out on the 29th, so it's just so hectic just now. But the videos will continue. I'll get a few more out before I go, and then I'll be sending them out from the Philippines as soon as I have a reasonable internet connection.
Well, thank you once again.
Thank you very much indeed for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Good night.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, and hope you get a great night's sleep.
I will do. Don't worry about that. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. And next Tuesday, we have Jen Smith back, and they will be talking about the trans cult we didn't really get into in the last interview. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. And we have another guest, the one we read the letter about next Thursday, who's a desisting transitioner. And, yeah, it will be interesting to see what they have to say. Anyway, guys, thank you so much, and have a great weekend. And don't do anything we wouldn't do. Enjoy yourselves, and good night. We love you, but remember to always love yourselves too. Good night.